The night the world learned the truth about Alexander Vale, he was eating alone again. A single fork, a single plate, a single man at the far end of a table, long enough to swallow echoes. Rain tapped against the 32nd floor windows of Vale Industries, like impatient fingers begging him to look up. But he didn't. He never did. The storm could rage. The city could burn. The universe could scream. Yet the billionaire no one truly knew sat in that same high-backed leather chair, slicing through dinner with the precision of someone controlling the only thing in life that had never betrayed him: food. It stayed still. It never left. It didn't ask why he looked so tired. Tonight, though, something in the air felt heavier, thicker, the kind of heaviness that comes before a shift, a moment that rewrites everything. A distant hum floated from the hallway. Cleaning carts. The janitorial staff had begun their nightly rounds. He heard them every evening at this hour. The rolling wheels bumping the familiar door frame, the faint squeak of a mop handle when it shifted. But none ever came near the executive dining room. They knew the rule. Mr. Vale does not like to be disturbed. And they obeyed. Everyone obeyed. Alexander set his knife down with a controlled exhale, forcing his shoulders into stillness. His posture looked flawless, elegant, rigid. Yet beneath the surface lived a man held together by threadbare strands of duty and exhaustion. His reflection glimmered faintly in the window. Sharp jaw, storm-gray eyes, a face the world labeled unbreakable. But his reflection stared back with a truth he never allowed anyone to see. He was breaking. Silently, slowly, deeply. Across the room the lights dimmed automatically, adjusting to the hour. Alexander barely noticed. These routines had wrapped around his life so tightly they had become more predictable than his own heartbeat. Then, a sound broke the rhythm. Not the rolling wheels of a cart, not the squeak of a mop, not the polite knock of an assistant asking for a signature. A soft gasp, a small, startled inhale, close enough that it could only belong to someone who had stepped inside the quiet world he built to keep everyone out. Alexander's head lifted slowly. At the doorway stood a woman holding a faded blue mop, her posture stiff, her eyes wide with embarrassment. She wasn't supposed to be there. She knew it. He knew it. The building knew it. She must have taken a wrong turn, or pushed the wrong door, or then he saw it. The badge on her uniform read, Marion. A janitor, young, early 20s, maybe. Brown hair pulled into a messy bun, rushed together between floors. Cheeks flushed from the strain of the night shift. Shoes damp from the rain she must have crossed on her way inside. She had the look of someone who had endured far more than her age suggested, yet still kept moving because stopping wasn't an option. Her eyes flicked to him, to the table, to the silent room, then back again. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered, gripping the mop like a lifeline. "I thought this floor was already done for the night." No one ever apologized to him that softly. No one spoke to him with that kind of tremor, afraid, not of him, but of disappointing someone. Alexander didn't move, didn't blink. He simply met her gaze, absorbing the disruption in a ritual he had kept intact for years. He should have told her to leave. He should have reminded her of protocol. He should have returned to his dinner and the solitude he convinced himself he preferred. But he didn't, because something in her voice slipped past the armor he'd welded shut. Armor forged from old wounds, collapsed trust, and a loneliness that had grown into a second shadow. "It's fine," he said quietly, his tone steadier than he felt. "You're already here." Her eyes widened, not with fear, but shock. No employee ever heard "it's fine" from the CEO, known for the coldness of mountain stone. Marion took a small step back. Her fingers trembled. She looked ready to disappear. He noticed. "Stay," he said softly. She froze, confused, her brows knitted carefully. "Sir, I didn't mean." He paused, searching for words he rarely used. "I meant you don't need to leave as if you've done something unforgivable." Her shoulders eased, Just a touch. Thank you, she murmured. Silence settled again. But it wasn't the suffocating silence Alexander knew. This one held breath, warmth, human presence. Do you always work this late? He asked, surprising himself. She shrugged lightly. Night shift pays a little more. Helps with things. What things? The question slipped out before he could stop it. He wasn't supposed to ask. He wasn't supposed to care. Caring opened doors he had closed long ago. Marian hesitated, then answered with the kind of honesty that comes from exhaustion deeper than sleep. Rent, medicine, groceries, life. Alexander absorbed that quietly, a faint ache stirring beneath his ribs. He had forgotten what emotional struggle felt like. Not financial struggle, emotional. And every buried hardship flickered back to life through her voice. He gestured to the empty table around him. Sit. Her eyes widened again. Sir, I can't sit here. You can, he said gently, and I would like you to. Why? He could have lied. He could have made it about maintenance or scheduling or formality. But the truth pressed against him with a weight he couldn't swallow. Because I'm tired of eating alone. The words escaped him raw and unfiltered. The room shifted the instant they left his mouth, like a sealed window had finally cracked open. Marian watched him, as if piecing together a puzzle she hadn't realized she stepped into. Slowly, carefully, she approached the chair opposite him. She set her mop aside, wiped her hands on her uniform, and quietly lowered herself into the seat. She didn't reach for anything, didn't adjust her posture, didn't breathe too loudly. She simply waited, unsure if she was allowed to exist in his space. Alexander pushed his untouched dessert toward her, a small gesture, monumental for him. I can't take that, she whispered. You can, he said. And you should. Her lips curved not into a smile, but into the smallest recognition he'd seen in years. As she took a bite, the air shifted. The rain softened. The lights warmed. The walls no longer felt so distant. For the first time in a long time, silence didn't feel like his enemy. They talked, quietly, cautiously. Two strangers weaving a fragile thread between their worlds. She told him she used to paint before bills took over. He told her he used to play piano before success drowned everything else. She missed laughter. He missed peace. Minutes stretched. The world outside faded. Even the rain seemed to listen. And then, a sudden crack of thunder split the sky. Marian flinched violently, her fork clattering. Her breath hitched, her hands shook. Fear flashed in her eyes, not fear of storms. Something deeper. Trauma. She tried to steady herself, but her breathing turned sharp, uneven. I'm sorry, she gasped. I'm okay. Storms, loud noises. I didn't mean... Alexander rose and moved beside her, not touching, not crowding, just present in a way he had forgotten how to be. You don't need to apologize, he whispered. Her breaths trembled, her shoulders curled inward, trying to disappear. He lowered his voice even more. Marian, you're safe here. She shut her eyes. 3 words. 3 words he never expected to say. 3 words she had never expected to hear. Words that would echo long after tonight. Words she desperately needed. Words that unlocked something in both of them. You're safe here. And in that moment, as thunder rolled across the sky, as her trembling eased, as the billionaire who dined alone finally let someone sit close, something irreversible began. Something delicate. Something dangerous. Something quietly beautiful. Something that would reshape a man the world believed had no heart. Something that would rewrite the quiet destiny of a janitor who had forgotten comfort. Something that started right here, in this room, with those 3 words. And Marian opened her eyes. The tremor in her breath lingered, but something in her expression had shifted. The panic hadn't vanished, it had simply loosened its grip. As though those 3 words had pried open a door she never expected anyone to touch. You're safe here. The phrase hovered between them, warm in a room that had always felt cold. Alexander watched her carefully, not with the scrutiny of a CEO judging a mistake, but with the quiet vigilance of a man suddenly aware of how fragile another human being could be. Marion swallowed hard. Her voice returned in a thin, uncertain whisper. I haven't heard that in a long time. Alexander stayed beside her, hands relaxed, posture controlled, doing everything he could to be present without overwhelming her. Then you should hear it more, he said softly. She blinked, startled by the sincerity in his tone. Most people spoke to him through a filter of fiercely polished professionalism. But he spoke to her as if some part of him, some buried part, had finally softened. Thunder rolled outside again, softer this time. Marion didn't flinch as violently, though her hands still trembled in her lap. Alexander noticed without staring. He walked to the long windows, adjusted the shades, and dimmed the lights until the flashes were muted, distant, more like faraway sparks than lightning. When he returned, she breathed a little easier. I didn't mean to cause a scene, she murmured, eyes downcast. You didn't. I did. I always do. She offered a shaky smile that didn't touch her eyes. I'm used to cleaning messes, not making them. Alexander studied her with steady calm. That wasn't a mess, he said. She shook her head gently. You don't understand. He didn't argue. He simply waited. Something about him, his stillness, his quiet presence, invited honesty without demand. After a long moment, she whispered, Storms remind me of things I try not to remember. His jaw tightened, not from impatience, but from recognition. Memories had teeth. His had shaped him, carved him, restrained him. He understood that kind of shadow too well. You don't have to explain, he said softly. But if I don't explain, she murmured, you'll think I'm weak. Alexander exhaled slowly. Weakness isn't what you think it is. She lifted her eyes to him, searching. You really believe that? I've lived long enough to know it, he replied quietly. Silence settled again, but it wasn't empty this time. It was thick, meaningful, threaded with vulnerability instead of isolation. Marion drew a deep breath, steadying her voice. When I was younger, storms meant shouting, doors slamming, things breaking, people leaving, sometimes people hurting each other. She wrapped her arms around herself. My body still reacts like it's happening again, even when it's not. Alexander didn't speak immediately. His throat tightened with a quiet ache, an ache he rarely allowed himself to feel for anyone. I'm sorry, he murmured. She shrugged faintly. Life doesn't care who gets bruised. No, he knew that truth better than he wished he did. Before he could respond, another sound broke through, soft, small, unmistakable. Her stomach growled. Marion flushed deeply. I'm so sorry. I didn't eat before my shift. Things were hectic, and I didn't think I'd still be on this floor, and… Alexander raised a hand gently, not to silence, but to calm. Relax. She looked mortified, but he felt something else entirely, a quiet fury at a world that made people apologize for being hungry. He walked to the intercom panel. I'll order something. Her eyes widened. No, please don't trouble anyone for me. I'm fine, really. You're not, he said softly. And there is no trouble. He pressed the button, then paused. What do you like? He asked. The question seemed to startle her more than the offer itself. I don't know, she admitted. I usually just eat whatever's cheapest. The words hit him harder than thunder. Then tonight, he said gently, choose something you actually want. She looked at the menu screen as if it were forbidden. I haven't had pasta in months, she whispered. Not real pasta. He entered the order. A gourmet Italian dish would arrive shortly. Marion watched him as if he had rewritten the rules of her world. No one had ever asked what she preferred. No one had cared if she ate. No one had made room for her comfort. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. Maybe not, he said, but I wanted to. Her breath caught at the quiet certainty in his voice. He returned to the chair across from her. For the first time in years, Alexander Vale did not feel like the distant king of a lonely empire. He felt like a man sitting across from someone unafraid to be human. Marion tucked loose strands of hair behind her ear. You eat alone every night? He nodded. Why? He hesitated, her question brushing against places he kept locked. But something about her honesty, her tremor, her resilience, opened the door just enough. Because dinner is the only hour when no one expects anything from me, he said quietly. No contracts, no decisions, no lies, no masks. She considered that. But you're still alone. Yes, he said softly. Alone, but at peace. Are you? The simplicity of the question hit him like a gentle blade. He didn't answer, because he didn't know. Before either could speak again, the elevator chimed. Alexander stood automatically, an instinct built from years of being approached with demands. But the server who entered wheeled the cart toward Marion first, not him, because the order was under her name. Her cheeks turned crimson. The server arranged the dishes, bowed, and left. Marion stared at the plate as if it were delicate art. I've never eaten anything this fancy, she admitted. Try it, he said. She took a small bite, then another. Her eyes fluttered shut. This is incredible. He watched her rediscover something she had lost, the simple pleasure of enjoying something without guilt. You act like giving is easy for you, she said softly, but it must be harder for someone who's used to everyone taking from you. Her observation struck deeper than she realized. People didn't take his money. He didn't care about losing that. They took time, trust, pieces of him he could never regain. Marion continued eating slowly, savoring every bite. After a moment, she looked up. You don't let people close, do you? Alexander's breath tightened. No. Why not? He searched for the cold version of himself, the mask he'd always worn. But that version had faded the moment she stepped into his quiet world. Because the last time I did, he said softly, I lost everything worth keeping. Her eyes softened. Someone hurt you? He didn't nod. He didn't need to. Silence answered. Marion set her fork down gently. I won't ask for details, she said, but I know how betrayal changes the shape of a life. He looked at her, searching for the key she had unknowingly handed him. Does it ever stop hurting? He asked quietly. She exhaled. When you stop expecting the past to apologize. His pulse stilled. She didn't just understand pain, she understood healing. After a while, she asked, do you ever get tired of pretending you're invincible? Yes, he whispered. Then stop pretending. He stared at her, caught between disbelief and something dangerously close to relief. People expect a certain version of me, he said. Let them expect whatever they want, she replied gently. You don't owe the world your soul just because they admire your success. He breathed in sharply, not at the boldness of her words, but at their truth. Thunder rumbled again. Marion's shoulders stiffened slightly, but she didn't crumble this time. She focused on her breathing, grounding herself. You handled that well, he said. It's easier when someone's talking. Quiet rooms make storms louder. He nodded slowly. I understand. They sat in a softened glow. Rain trailed down the windows like silver threads. The city hummed below, unaware that something fragile and extraordinary was unfolding 32 floors above it. After a while, Marion pushed the plate away. I should get back to work. You don't need to rush, he said. If I don't finish, I'll get written up. I'll make sure you don't, he said gently. She hesitated, unused to being protected. She stood, reached for her mop, and Alexander walked her to the door. Not to hurry her out, but because something inside him refused to let her leave alone. At the threshold, she turned back. You won't dine alone tomorrow, she said softly. He blinked. Are you offering to join me? She shook her head with a faint, genuine smile. No, I'm saying you won't want to. He frowned slightly. Why not? Marion held his gaze, steady, unwavering. Because tonight changed something. For you. And maybe for me. His breath caught, held, and didn't release. She stepped into the hallway. The corridor lights wrapped around her as she pushed her cart forward. She didn't look back. but her words lingered like a promise he didn't know he needed. He watched until she turned the corner and disappeared. For the first time in years, the dining room felt too quiet, too empty, too hollow without her presence softening the edges. He stepped inside again, staring at the chair she had occupied. A storm still echoed faintly outside. But inside him, something else stirred. Something unfamiliar, something fragile, something alive. He wasn't sure what it meant. He wasn't sure where it was leading. He only knew one thing. He didn't want tonight to be the last time. And that thought frightened him more than the storm ever could. For a long time after Marion left, Alexander Vale stood in the center of the vast executive dining room, staring at the empty chair across from his. A chair that, until tonight, had never been touched by anyone but him. A chair that now felt like the most significant object in the room. It still held the warmth of her presence, the imprint of an ordinary life, brushing against one built on isolation. He had built walls so high, so thick, that no one had ever tried to climb them. Not employees, not business partners, not even the few friends he used to have before success demanded silence. But Marion, she hadn't climbed the wall. She had simply walked through a crack he didn't realize existed. And now, the thought of eating alone again felt unbearable. He moved to the window, watching the faint glow of the city soften as the storm drifted away. His reflection in the glass looked different tonight, less rigid, less controlled, less invincible. He whispered to himself, "What are you doing, Alexander?" No answer came. Of course not. He'd stopped talking to himself years ago, convinced there was nothing left worth saying. Yet tonight, something unfamiliar tugged at him, a pull towards someone who hadn't asked for anything from him except honesty. A janitor. A woman who worked until her feet ached. A woman who feared storms because storms once came with fists and shouting and doors slamming. A woman who treated a plate of pasta like a gift from another world. She had changed the atmosphere of his entire evening without even trying. He exhaled slowly. He couldn't sleep, not like this. So he made a decision, a reckless, unplanned decision. He would find her, not to pressure her, not to confuse her, not to interfere. He just needed to see her again, to understand why the silence felt wrong without her voice softening the edges. Alexander left the dining room and took the private elevator to the lower floors. He stepped into the hallway where the custodial team stored their supplies, expecting to find her finishing her shift. But the hallway was empty. Only the smell of cleaning solution lingered. Her cart was gone. A man in a gray uniform approached, older, with glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He nodded respectfully. "Evening, Mr. Vale." "Good evening," Alexander replied. "Have you seen Marion?" The man blinked in surprise. "The new girl?" "Yes, sir. She finished her floors early tonight. Left about 15 minutes ago." She was already gone. Of course she was. Alexander stepped back, suppressing the disappointment tightening his chest. "Thank you." He turned and walked away, the echo of his footsteps following him back toward the elevator. He told himself he wasn't chasing her. He told himself he was simply checking on an employee. But the truth was quieter and far more dangerous. He didn't want this night to end yet. The next day, Alexander arrived at his office earlier than usual. His staff watched him with subtle curiosity. He wasn't storming through the hallways, wasn't demanding updates, wasn't buried in calls. He was quieter, more distant and more present at the same time. Around noon, his assistant knocked. "Mr. Vale, lunch has been prepared in your dining room." He almost said he wasn't hungry. He almost said he'd eat later. But instead, "Thank you," he replied. He walked slowly to the dining room. The same long table awaited him, polished and pristine. The same distant windows overlooked the city. The same soft lights glowed. But she wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. She wouldn't return unless she needed to clean the floor again. He had no logical reason to expect her. Still, disappointment slid through him like a quiet shadow. He sat. Food was placed before him. He barely touched it, because there was no voice across from him saying storms were loud. No quiet presence softening the corners of the room. No warm, careful gaze grounding his thoughts. He realized something unsettling. He didn't miss her words. He missed the way she listened. He missed her sincerity, something rare, raw, unfiltered by fear or ambition. She hadn't pretended to be impressed by him. She hadn't asked for anything. She hadn't looked at him like a billionaire. She had looked at him like a man who was struggling quietly. And that, more than anything, unnerved him. After a long moment, he pushed his plate away. This wasn't working. He stood abruptly, left the dining room, and headed for the lower floors. When he reached the janitorial area again, he finally found Marion, this time pushing a cart loaded with fresh towels and cleaning supplies. Her sleeves were rolled up, revealing faint bruises on her forearms, not new, but old enough to hint at a story she hadn't spoken aloud. Alexander approached carefully. "Marion." She jolted, then recognized him and relaxed. Not completely, but enough for her shoulders to drop slightly. "Mr. Vale," she said softly, "I didn't expect to see you down here." "I didn't expect to be here," he admitted. She studied him for a moment. "You look tired." He let out a quiet breath. "I didn't sleep much. Storms do that," she said. "No," he replied, "not storms." Her eyes softened just enough to show she understood. She didn't tease him. She didn't pry. Instead, she lifted a folded towel and placed it neatly on the cart. "Is something wrong?" He hesitated. How could he answer without sounding absurd, without sounding unprofessional, without stepping over a line he wasn't supposed to cross? He chose honesty. Simple, clean, unguarded honesty. "Last night," he said quietly, "I didn't expect you to stay, but I'm glad you did." Marion's breath caught. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "It was just dinner," she whispered. "It wasn't," he replied. "Not for me." A faint flush warmed her cheeks. She didn't smile, but something in her eyes brightened. "I should finish this floor," she murmured. "I can walk with you," he said, before he could stop himself. She raised an eyebrow. "You want to watch me mop a hallway?" "Yes." The answer came too fast, too earnest. He didn't correct himself. Marion gave him a long, searching look. "You're not used to wanting things, are you?" she asked. He didn't flinch. "No." She nodded slowly. "Then maybe this is good for you." She began pushing the cart, and Alexander walked beside her, not hovering, not instructing, simply existing in the same space. He watched her work, not to evaluate her, but because watching her grounded him. Every stroke of the mop was steady, rhythmic, almost soothing. "You're very precise," he observed quietly. "Comes with practice," she said. "Life feels too chaotic if I don't control the little things." "I understand that," he replied. "More than you know." As she moved down the hallway, he asked, "Do you ever take breaks?" "Rarely." "When was your last day off?" She thought for a moment. 3 weeks ago. Maybe more." Something twisted in his chest. "You deserve more than this," he said. "I deserve to survive," she answered gently. "Everything else is a bonus." He looked at her differently then, not with pity, with respect. Marion finished the last section of the hallway, rinsed the mop, and leaned against the cart to catch her breath. A thin sheen of sweat shone on her forehead. "You work harder than most executives I've met," he said. She laughed softly. "Executives have air conditioning." A faint smile tugged at his lips. She had humor, quiet, dry, unexpected. He found himself wanting to hear it again. When she moved the cart toward the elevator, he followed without hesitation. On the next floor, they stepped out together. She walked ahead. He walked beside her. They didn't speak for a while, but the silence felt warm, not hollow. Finally, she asked, "Why are you really here, Mr. Vale?" He exhaled slowly. "This morning I sat in the dining room alone," he said. "And for the first time in my life, it felt wrong." She stopped, turned, met his eyes. And you think that's because of me? She asked quietly. I don't think, he said. I know. Her lips parted, but no sound came. For a moment, she looked fragile, caught between disbelief and something far more dangerous. Hope. Alexander, she whispered, the formality slipping away. I'm just a janitor. He stepped a little closer, not enough to crowd her, just enough for his voice to reach her gently. And I'm just a man. Her breath hitched. We are not from the same world, she murmured. No, he agreed. But last night, our worlds touched. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with something softer, something that hinted at a life where she wasn't only the girl who cleaned floors. The air around them tightened. The hallway grew still. Even the hum of fluorescent lights faded into the background. Alexander took a careful breath. Would you join me tonight? He asked softly. Just dinner. Nothing more. She looked torn, caught between comfort and fear. People will talk, she whispered. People always talk. And your staff are irrelevant. And your reputation? I don't care. You should, she said, almost instinctively. He leaned in just slightly. I care more about a conversation that wasn't supposed to happen than a reputation built on loneliness. Her lips trembled. Alexander, you can say no, he said gently. She hesitated. Her gaze dropped to the floor, then lifted to his, then drifted toward the unspoken memory of last night between them. Slowly, very slowly, she nodded. I'll come. His chest tightened, not with fear, but with relief so sharp it felt like breathing after nearly drowning. Marian picked up her mop again, grounding herself. I get off at 8. I'll change before coming up. I'll be waiting, he said. She held his gaze one more moment, fragile, brave, uncertain, hopeful. Then she turned and continued down the hall, her footsteps echoing softly. Alexander watched her until she disappeared around the corner. This wasn't a ritual he had planned. This wasn't a pattern he understood. This wasn't the life he had built. This was something new, something raw, something terrifying. And as he stepped into the silent elevator, he finally allowed himself to name it. He wanted her there. Not as company, not out of pity, but because something inside him had finally woken up, and he wasn't ready to let it sleep again. And he wasn't ready to let it sleep again. All day, Alexander felt the ticking of the clock like a pulse under his skin. Meetings blurred. Calls droned in the background. Emails went unanswered. His assistant asked twice if he was feeling well, because he wasn't pacing, wasn't firing instructions, wasn't ruling the building with the cold calm he was known for. No, today felt different. The anticipation grew with every passing hour, stretching his nerves thin in a way he hadn't felt since he was young enough to still believe in connection. It was a strange, unsteady energy, the kind that comes before a shift so deep it changes the shape of a life. By 7:30, he couldn't stay in his office any longer. He left early without explanation and went straight to the executive dining room. The staff had already set the table. 2 plates this time, not 1. His chest tightened when he saw it. Someone had guessed he wasn't eating alone tonight. He stood by the tall windows, watching the city lights flicker on one by one, like distant stars coming alive. His reflection glimmered faintly, still sharp, still composed, but beneath that cold exterior lived a man bracing for something he wasn't trained to handle. When the door opened at exactly 8, he turned, and there she was. Marian stepped into the room slowly, almost cautiously, as though she feared waking from a dream she didn't quite trust. Her hair was combed neatly, no longer tucked into the messy bun she wore on shift. Her uniform was gone, replaced by a simple dark sweater and jeans. Modest, clean, carefully chosen. She looked different. Not polished, not glamorous, just herself. And somehow that was more disarming than any elegance could have been. You came, he said softly. You asked, she whispered, closing the door behind her. He gestured toward the chair she'd occupied the night before. She hesitated, then sat, this time without trembling. He took his seat across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. The room felt warm, calm, almost reverent. The storm had passed, but the memory of that night lingered in the air like a quiet echo. I was nervous all day, Marian admitted, breaking the silence. So was I. Her lips curved faintly. You don't look like someone who gets nervous. You don't look like someone who's afraid of storms, he countered gently. She lowered her gaze. People hide things. Yes, he said quietly, they do. Dinner was served, roasted vegetables, delicate rolls, a rich aromatic dish placed between them, but neither reached for the food right away. The table felt like a bridge, and crossing it required more than appetite. Marian exhaled slowly. You didn't have to invite me, she murmured. I know, he replied. I wanted to. She lifted her eyes, searching his. Why? He thought of lying, of calling it kindness, curiosity, politeness. But lies had built his walls, and he was trying, for once, to open a door instead of closing one. Because last night, he said calmly, you made this room feel alive. She blinked, startled. A room doesn't make a person lonely, she said quietly. No, he answered, but it reflects it. She studied him carefully. You hide your loneliness, she said softly, the way I hide my fear. He didn't deny it. Maybe that's why we understood each other, he replied. Another silence, gentle, unthreatening, settled across the room. Marian traced the rim of her plate with one finger. I'm not sure I belong here. Neither am I, he said honestly. But you're here, she swallowed. People like me shouldn't sit at tables like this. People like you? He repeated. You mean people who work? People who survive? People who endure? She shook her head faintly. People who aren't important. Alexander leaned forward, voice low, unwavering. You are important. She inhaled sharply, not because she believed it, but because she didn't know how to. He continued, softer now. You matter, Marian. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Her eyes glistened, not with overflowing tears, but with a quiet ache that had been living inside her for years. She looked down, whispering, I don't know how to accept that. Neither do I, he confessed. So maybe we learn together. A trembling breath left her. She nodded. Only then did they begin to eat. The conversation flowed easier this time, gentler, lighter. They spoke about small things, her love for painting, even though she hadn't held a brush in years, his habit of waking before sunrise because silence felt kinder at dawn. They laughed once, softly, unexpectedly, when she told him she once spilled an entire bucket of mop water on her supervisor's shoes. You laughed? He asked. I panicked, she said. Then I laughed because the alternative was crying. He understood that all too well. When dinner ended, neither moved to leave. The room had become a cocoon, holding them inside a moment neither wanted to lose. Can I ask you something? Marian said quietly. Anything. She drew in a slow breath. What happened to you? She asked. Before all this. Before the company. Before the walls. He wasn't surprised she saw them. Anyone who had survived enough pain recognized another survivor. He turned slightly, looking out at the city lights as if steadying himself on the skyline. My father, he began, voice low, believed kindness made men weak. He taught me to earn everything and trust nothing. When I built the company, I tried to prove him wrong. I wanted to believe people could be loyal, that they could stay. He paused, exhaled, but the world kept proving him right. People betrayed me, used me, left when I needed them most. His gaze fell to the table. So I stopped letting anyone close, he said. It was easier. Does easy make you happy? She asked softly. No, he whispered. Just safe. She reached across the table, not touching his hand, just placing hers close enough that he could feel its warmth. Safe isn't always living, she murmured. His eyes lifted to hers, and something inside him shifted again, like a lock turning in a hidden door. What about you? He asked. What shaped your fear of storms? Her breath caught. She looked down, her fingers curled slightly. My childhood, she whispered. There were nights when the thunder outside was nothing compared to the shouting inside. I used to hide under a blanket and wait for the storm in the house to stop. It never did. Even now, when thunder hits, my body goes back. Alexander didn't speak. He couldn't. Her words cut through him with a sharp, quiet truth. But then she lifted her head. Last night didn't feel as bad, she said. He knew why. Her eyes told him she knew he knew. You weren't alone, he said gently. She nodded. And neither were you, she whispered back. The air tightened, charged, delicate, undeniable. For the first time in years, he felt a kind of peace so foreign he barely recognized it. Not because he was simply with someone, but because he was with someone who saw him, not the power, not the wealth, not the title. Him, the man beneath the noise. He stood slowly and circled the table toward her. Marian rose on instinct, startled, not scared, just unsteady with the weight of the moment. He didn't reach for her. He didn't crowd her. He stood close enough that his voice reached her like warmth. Marian, he said softly, I don't know what this is. I don't know where it leads. But I know I don't want to go back to the version of me who ate alone every night. Her breath trembled. And what do you want instead? She asked. He let the truth fall gently, unforced. I want to share my table, if you'll share your time. She shut her eyes for a heartbeat, overwhelmed not by fear, but by the unfamiliar feeling of being chosen for something that wasn't necessity or convenience. When she opened them again, her voice shook. I'm scared. So am I, he admitted. What if I'm not enough for your world? She whispered. What if my world isn't enough for you? He replied. She looked up, surprised by his vulnerability. Alexander continued, voice low and raw. I don't want perfection. I don't want performance. I want honesty. And last night, you gave me more honesty than I've had in years. Marian's lips trembled. People like us, we break easily, she said. Then we'll be careful, he answered. Her chest rose with a slow, uneven breath. Why me? She whispered. He exhaled, a long, steady release, as though letting go of years of unsaid truth. Because you reminded me I'm human. Silence washed over the room, soft, warm, alive. Marian didn't step back. She didn't hide. She didn't apologize for existing in his world. Instead, she lifted her hand, hesitant, fragile, and placed it gently over his. The touch was small, bare. But for both of them, it was seismic. He didn't grit. He didn't pull her closer. He simply let her hand rest there, as though acknowledging something sacred. After a long, steady moment, she whispered 3 words. 3 words that mirrored his from the night before. 3 words carrying all the courage she had left. Words that would change everything for him. I trust you. He inhaled sharply. Not because of romance. Not because of fantasy. Because trust was something he thought he had lost the right to receive. He lifted her hand gently, holding it with a reverence he rarely gave anything. You said last night changed something, he murmured. Yes, she whispered. And tonight changed more. Her eyes softened. What now? He exhaled, letting every wall finally fall away. Now, he said quietly, we learn how to not be alone anymore. Marian stepped closer, just a fraction, but enough for her presence to wrap around him like a quiet embrace. For the first time in his life, Alexander Vale wasn't dining with silence. He was dining with possibility. Hours later, when she finally left the room, the chair she had occupied no longer felt like a symbol of emptiness. It felt like a beginning. Alexander stood alone for only a moment before he whispered into the soft quiet, Tomorrow, I won't dine alone either. And for once, the room didn't echo. It agreed.